All right, I am back here today getting ready to preview the rest of the week one action with the host of the Athletics Football Podcast, Robert Mays, on the line. Robert, this is Mike Phillips calling from New York. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. It's dreary here, but I'm still kind of riding the high about getting to watch live football last night, so I'm getting over it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I got to watch the game last night too. Although I will admit I did check out when the Chiefs went up big in the third quarter. It was 31-7. So, what's your big takeaway from that game last night?
I mean, I think that just the Chiefs are going to have another layer to their offense this year. I mean, I think that's the only thing you can really take away, just because it's a quantity that's new. We got to see it for the first time with what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to bring to them. I also think that Clutch Assembly added a real physicality to their offensive line. And, you just think about how do these teams continue to kind of stay a step ahead? How do, great teams always evolve slightly from season to season? I think the question was going to be, what are the Chiefs going to do now that's different? And I think last night kind of provided the answer for us.
Yeah, as a Jet fan myself, I will say I'm not shocked that Kelechi Osemele looked much better getting away from Adam Gase and playing on a Super Bowl winning team.
It's amazing what happens when you actually want to be there, and football is enjoyable because you're playing for a good team. It's crazy how that happens.
Yeah, it is crazy how that happens. And they're one storyline that's going to be tracking here. And what are some other storylines looking forward to tracking over the course of the season?
I think that, what teams, look good kind of early on, I think is going to be something that dominates the first month of the year. Who has continuity and kind of rides through this very strange off season. And obviously the Chiefs are a team like that. Edwards-Helaire and Osemele are new, but everybody else there is the same. They brought a huge portion of their offense back. I think that's going to allow them to hit the ground running in a way that maybe a team like New Orleans or the Cowboys, these teams that we've assumed will have high-powered offenses and are bringing back a good chunk of those offenses are going to be able to just be good from day one, as some of these defenses are going to have communication issues. So I think that's going to be one of them. And then I'm curious about kind of the older quarterback group. Obviously last night when you have Mahomes and Watson kicking off the season, you have this younger class of quarterbacks that's come along that's really kind of taken hold of the league. But I mean, if you think about kind of the golden age of quarterbacks that's aging out of the league right now, whether it's Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, I think all of them, even Phillip Rivers, they're all in really interesting spots. Their teams are really set up to be successful this year if those guys play well. So I'm very curious to see what those kind of late 30s, early 40 quarterbacks are going to look like in what's a very important season for pretty much every single one of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's go to some of the week one games. That's sort of the immediate future we have here. And I want to start with the New York teams. Obviously, I'm based in New York. Start with the Jets going up to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Jets played them close a couple times last year, but there again, the offensive line's rebuilt. Sam Darnold's question on the outside. The Bills are projected the favorites in the AFC East. What are you looking forward to in that game?
I'm just curious to see what the Bills' offense looks like. Does Josh Allen take a step? What do they look like with Stephon Diggs? That was a huge move. I really felt like that was kind of the last kind of finishing piece of what they needed to really push them over the top outside of Josh Allen's own development. So what does he look like with that receiving core? That's a team that outside of Diggs really bought most of their pieces back. Their offensive line, they've lost John Feliciano, but they still have a lot of guys there who've been there. So what are they going to look like is a real question for me. And I think the same goes for the Jets offense. This is a team, I think Adam Gase came out yesterday and essentially said, we were terrible last year. You have to throw out every single thing, every single stat about last season. And I'm wondering, should we? Is that just what the Jets offense is? Are they going to be better with that line? Who's Sam Darnold going to throw the ball to? Is he somebody they can rely on kind of moving forward? But this is a huge year for him, considering that we're probably going to have a new coaching staff there next year, I would assume. And the regime in the building did not draft him. So that to me is a really big question for what the Jets' future is going to look like. Is Sam Darnold the guy, and how early can he prove that he is?
Yeah, he's got a big test ahead of him this week. The other New York team, the Giants, they get a big test. On Monday night, they play host to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger back. I think people forget that team went 8-8 without him on the strength of that defense. I feel like this is a game the Steelers could have a very easy time winning.
I think the Steelers might be a really good team. Ben Roethlisberger's health is a huge question. He's 38 years old. He's coming off a non-contact elbow injury. But apparently his elbow has been bothering him for a little while, even before that injury happened. And hopefully the surgery will get him back to a place where he feels comfortable. The biggest jump you can make, I've said this a lot over the years, as an NFL team, is going from true bottom-of-the-barrel quarterback play to even competent quarterback play. So going from a combination of Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph to Ben Roethlisberger, and this is a team that finished 31st in offensive DVOA last year. If they can be 12th when you consider what their defense can be, they automatically kind of become a contender in the AFC. There are questions about how good their defense is going to be, how much they'll carry over. They led the league in turnovers created last year. That number isn't typically sticky, but pass rush numbers often are, and they're bringing back their entire front four. They get Javon Hargrave leaves, but they get Stephon Tuitt back. So their real nickel pass rush packages are going to look like what they would have wanted them to look like, and they might be even better than they were last year. So I have a really good feeling about that team if Roethlisberger's healthy and can play pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a rough year for the Giants, too, because there's so much work to do.
Oh, I just don't know. I have so many questions about them because the defensive talent is just not good. I mean, it's still not good. And when you consider the money they've kind of poured into that side of the ball, whether it's James Bradbury or Blake Martinez, I mean, they just have nobody up front. I have zero faith in that pass rush. I don't know what that defense is going to look like. You know, you look at what the Patriots kind of influence teams have been with old Belichick, old assistants, whether you think about Matt Patricia in Detroit or who else am I thinking of here? I guess it was last year in Miami with Brian Flores. So the Dolphins defense last year, they ran a ton of man as well without blitz. So the Giants are going to do that. If Patrick Graham was their new defense coordinator, is going to kind of follow that model and say, we're going to play a lot of man, we're not going to blitz a lot. I think they're in trouble because I don't think they have the personnel to make that work. And on the offensive side of the ball, they should be exciting. You know, I think Daniel Jones had some fun moments last year. And I think some of the things we saw from that skill position group when everyone got back healthy, it's like, all right, I could get on board with this. You draft a tackle in the top 5. I think the line might be a little bit better, even after losing Solder. But I just have such little faith in that offensive staff to kind of be on the cutting edge and be creative and everything else. Jason Garrett hasn't called an offense since before I started covering the NFL. And you have so many teams that are kind of seeking out these exciting options for play callers, and they're really trying to put their quarterbacks in the best spots to succeed. And I'm just not sure the Giants are doing that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with them this year. You brought up a lot of Patriot ties in that game. So I'm going to go to the Patriot-Dolphin game next. This is a big rematch for New England because Miami knocking them out week 17 really changed the course of the playoffs. Now Tom Brady's gone, Cam Newton's in. Big offseason for Miami. I'm very intrigued by this football game.
Absolutely. I mean, who knows what the Patriots are going to look like? I mean, I think the answer that's going to depend a ton on Cam Newton, his health. How much are they willing to run him? What does the passing game structure look like? Are they going to try to get the ball out of his hands quickly? I mean, there's so many mysteries kind of surrounding that team, especially with no preseason. I feel like they could jump on some people. The defense, I think, is definitely going to take a step back when you consider the turnover margin in the first half of last season, the players they lost. But it should still be a good group. So if Newton can play well and be somebody similar to the guy we saw even in 2018, I think they could be interesting. And like you said, the Miami offseason, I mean, the rebuild is over, man. It's over. They are here. I mean, they have spent their money. They've spent a lot of their draft picks. Obviously, they're going to be very young. I believe they're still one of the youngest teams in the NFL. So it's going to take a while for some of those guys to kind of develop. But, I mean, they're trying to get back on track here. So the defense is mostly veterans. The additions were all on a free agent market. So the question for that is, now that you have guys like Byron Jones, Kyle Van Noy, Shaq Lawson all in place, can you run the system that you want to, and can that system be successful? Because they were a disaster on that side of the ball last year. No fault of their own. They tried to tear it down, but the tear down is done. So they need to show that every move they made, all the money they spent, all the resources they used this spring was actually kind of in pursuit of something.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I feel like one game that's early in the day on Sunday, kind of slipping under the radar, but is that Packer-Viking show on the NFC North. What do you like in that game? What's intriguing to you there?
I want to see what the Packers offense looks like. You know, they spent the offseason really trying to bulk up, and, you know, obviously the moves they made were kind of in line with the idea that they were going to run the ball more. They wanted to be more physical. And I think that's the biggest question. On defense, a lot of static. I mean, they haven't changed much. Dropped Christian Kirksey in the middle of that team. I think that they need a little bit more athleticism at linebacker, which was their number one priority outside of a pass catcher coming into the year. So can they kind of keep up that pass rush juice that they had with Darius Smith near the end of last season? And if they can have their defense be around a top 10 unit, can the offense be efficient enough if they're going to lean more on the running game for them to kind of stick around? And the Vikings, I'm intrigued to see what Gary Kubiak looks like as a play caller. I mean, it's been a while since he's done it, but he's so good at it. And I think that they really showed last year that their personnel kind of fit that scheme with Kirk Cousins, with Dalvin Cook. I think that Adam Thielen coming back and kind of assuming that number one receiver role, they could be good again. So I mean, there's a lot. If you're talking to somebody who can find something interesting in pretty much any game you're going to put in front of me. So when it comes to week one, there's a lot of stuff that I'm excited about.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm definitely excited about. Another one I want to get to is also a little under the radar. Seattle going to Atlanta week one. I think it's very intriguing because I think everybody likes the Seahawks. But Atlanta is one of the teams I'm sleeping. I think it's a sleeper team. I think they could build that run they had in the second half. I think they could get to the playoffs out of the division. Do you think Atlanta can make a run this year?
Absolutely, I do, because I think that their floor on offense is so high. That's the thing with the Falcons, is that they're going to be good enough with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and the other talent on that side of the ball that if the defense can kind of catch some breaks and catch lightning in a bottle like it did over the second half of last season, they become interesting right away. You know, if Matt Ryan's healthy for 16 games and they don't suffer catastrophic injuries to Jones or someone else, what's the floor for them offensively? It's probably like a top 10 or 12 offense. And if that's what you're dealing with, I mean, that's what they were last year, even when they were struggling with offensive line injuries. So if that's the baseline, you don't need much else right to be a team that's kind of in the mix in a kind of muddled NFC wildcard picture. So they're not an exciting team to me just because it feels like the same old story with them. I feel like we've had this conversation so many times. You just kind of switch out the names. Like the young pass rusher, they need to be better is Tack McKinley now instead of Vic Beasley. The young corner, they need to be better is A.J. Terrell instead of Isaiah Oliver. So it just feels like the same thing and the same kind of dialogue about them, but that doesn't change the fact that they're still relevant.
Yeah, they are, and they're clearly the third team at the division. The top two are meeting on Sunday in the Fox game of the week with the Saints hosting the Buccaneers. No fans in New Orleans, but the fast track will still help them. I think this is definitely, the game I'm going to be locked in the most on. I think this is definitely has shootout potential.
For sure. I mean, it's Breeze, Brady in the same division. What does that Bucs offense look like? I mean, I don't think you have to be even, a football purist or somebody that loves the sport to be excited about this. And there's storylines galore. And I also think these teams are going to be good. I picked the Saints to win the Super Bowl. I think they're the deepest team in the NFL. And I just feel like they'll be able to kind of show that off from the start. Like we talked about at the beginning, this is a team that outside of a couple moving pieces on the offensive line and then Emmanuel Sanders coming in there, most of these guys know exactly what they're doing on offense. They've been there for a while. There's a reason Sean Payton kind of said, have fun this summer, guys. I'll see you in the fall. When the offseason program started. So, I mean, I just think that they're going to be one of those teams that come out guns blazing.
Yeah, and the Bucs too. I hope that Mike Evans is able to play in that game. I know he's got a hamstring issue, and it might take right on the game time. I'd like to see that matchup be full strength if possible.
It'd be great because I'm curious what the offense is going to look like, and I think it's hard to kind of make that determination without Mike Evans on the field because he just adds that vertical element. I love Scotty Miller, who went to my high school, but I'm not sure Scotty is going to have the same sort of impact on the offense that Mike Evans would if he's in the game. And I just really am curious what elements of what Brady does well and what elements of what the Bucs want to do in a vacuum kind of blend together and create that system. And that's one of the things I'm most looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, that's one thing that's also interesting. I've been reading around a lot of NFL stories. A lot of talk about how Bruce Arians' system, Bruce loves to take deep shots on the field, and that means Brady will get hit if he's doing that. He's not a guy who likes to get hit at this point in his career.
Yeah, he's not. And I think that's one of the biggest changes with them. And I think the biggest difference between him and Winston is going to be the turnover stuff. Because, the Jameis interception jokes are fun, but when you throw 30 interceptions in a season, when you average, I think it's 0.2 turnovers per possession, which led the league by a lot, and you replace that with a guy who never throws interceptions. I mean, Brady, for all of his ills as a quarterback as he's gotten older and for the drop-offs that he's had at other points, at other pieces of his game, his way of taking care of the ball is such a drastic change for this team. He just needs to be somebody that keeps the train on the schedule. Just keep the train on the tracks. Just make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot because the rest of the talent on that offense can kind of keep things going at a high rate. So I'm really curious just to see what they try to be on offense and whether they say, just take care of the ball, ride our playmakers, or if they're that super aggressive down the field approach that they've been with Arians in the past.
Yeah, that's true. I got two more games I want to touch on to you before you head out for after this call. So the first one I want to get to the Sunday night game with the Cowboys and the Rams. Cowboys obviously new head coach Mike McCarthy. The Rams, a lot of change again, new stadium. What's your thoughts on this matchup?
I'm excited to see what the Cowboys offense looks like. I mean, they're a team I think could absolutely be the number one seed in the NFC. I mean, I think they have the pieces on offense to be the best offense in football outside of Kansas City. And we'll see what they look like. They're going to lose Lyle Collins for a couple games at the beginning of the season. I think that's something not enough people have talked about after how well he played last year. But when you consider how well Dak Prescott played last season, the continuity with Kellen Moore as a play caller, and now him really taking control of the offense and not having Jason Garrett in his ear, and just the overall skill position talent they have, I think they could just be a rocket ship. I picked Dak to win MVP. I legitimately think that he could do that this year based on how explosive they're going to be. And I think that we could see that right away just because of how much uncertainty there is on the Rams defense. Beyond the personnel that's changed over when you consider losing Corey Littleton, just the secondary shakeups they've had over the last year. You have defensive line changes where, Dante Fowler's gone now, and Brandon Staley's taking over for Wade Phillips. Never been a coordinator before. First off season, not a lot of time to work with guys. I absolutely think the Cowboys could just put up 40 on Sunday, and I would not be surprised at all.
That would be a big statement for them in that game. And the last one I want to touch on is the Monday night late game with the Titans and the Broncos. I feel like the Titans are getting kind of slept on here after their run in the playoffs last year. I know Ryan Tannehill's probably going to regress a little bit, but I think they have a good shot to put a very good performance in that game against a Denver team that I don't buy the quarterback of just 5 games. So what do you think about the Titans' chances to do well in Denver this week?
I'll be curious to see what the Titans' offense looks like. I tend to agree with you. They're not going to be what they were last year, but they were historically efficient last year in some elements of their offense. I think their play action games from Football Outsiders, the stat was that they averaged 11 point something yards per attempt. They were the first team since the 2013 Broncos to average more than 11 yards per dropback on play action. That's not going to happen again. But even if it's 9.8 yards or 10 yards, you don't need to be historically great. You could merely be very good and still be a dynamic offense. I think that some of the things they did last season, whether it's the depth of target for Ryan Tannehill, the number of yak opportunities they created for A.J. Brown, just overall, I feel like the bones of what they do sets their players up to succeed. So I don't think they'll be the third best passing offense in the league like they were with Ryan Tannehill for 10 games, but I do think they can be in the top 10. And if they are, I think they have enough talent to be competitive in that conference.
Yeah, it will be a lot of fun to watch week 1. Robert, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, can you tell you how to follow on social media and subscribe to the new Athletic Football podcast, some of the stuff you're talking about on there?
Yeah, I'm at Robert Mays on Twitter. I just moved to the Athletic a couple weeks ago. We started the Athletic Football Show. It's 3 days a week. Sunday nights, Wednesdays, Thursdays. We've got a rotating group of different co-hosts, different guests. So, please check it out. Please subscribe to The Athletic, and I hope everyone enjoys the football season.
Yeah, I do enjoy The Athletic content. I did speak to Mike Sander earlier this week. A lot of great stuff coming out of The Athletic. Thanks for taking the time again, Robert. I really appreciate it.
Of course, absolutely.